Well, after 7 years, 6 seasons, and with the final installment having 3 parts, Cobra Kai has now officially come to an end. Following Kwon being killed in the Sekai Taikai tournament in the Season 6 Part 2 finale, the title of the best dojo and fighters in the world was the very thing that was left unresolved. However, this season saw the competition taking place on home soil in the All Valley as Daniel LaRusso and Johnny Lawrence went back to the very place where they fought each other in 1984. But this time they were on the same side. With epic battles, resolution for the characters, and some emotional moments embedded within it, let's dive into the final part of Season 6 and break down the ending of one of Netflix's biggest shows. Here is Cobra Kai Season 6 Part 3 Ending Explained. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. The ending explained. With regards to the ending of the show, it was a happy ending for all of the main characters. We saw that following Robbie losing to Axel, the main male fighter for the Iron Dragons due to him breaking his leg deliberately, and also Sam coming to terms with the fact that she didn't want to fight Tory, Miyagi-Do had to fold from the Sekai Taikai tournament. However, with it being the final season of the show, Johnny Lawrence revived Cobra Kai, and Miguel took the place in the final, meaning that both Miguel and Tory would be fighting under Cobra Kai. We saw that LaRusso didn't mind, because within his vision where he was fighting skeletons, a throwback to the original Karate Kid movie, Mr. Miyagi appeared to him and said that winning and losing wasn't the thing that mattered. This was after LaRusso was stressed about feeling like he wasn't going to be able to win the tournament. Mr. Miyagi showed him that it was more so about everything that karate had brought him in his life and the togetherness, community, and development as an individual which mattered more. What was poetic about this was that LaRusso was rooting for the dojo that he fought against 40 years prior to that in the exact same venue, so it showed the development of the character and the relationship. Tory and Zara had a feud from the previous part of the season, and Zara actually took the lead in the first round. However, with Robbie telling Tory that he loved her and that she should have no mercy, one of the 3 pillars of Cobra Kai, she went on to defeat Zara in a way which made her lose a tooth, ultimately coining her the fighting name, the Tooth Fairy, which we saw fans calling her in the final moments of the season. This gave Cobra Kai the points that they needed to claw back, especially due to there being a knockout. With regards to the male final, Axel was trained to essentially be a bone breaker by Sensei Wolf and win in ways which were unethical, as we saw with his fight against Robbie. However, against Miguel, he wasn't prepared to do that very thing, as Silver and Wolf wanted him to break Miguel's spine because of the weakness that was there due to his previous injury. This ultimately enabled Miguel to win the fight against Axel, the man that seemed pretty invincible, and Axel also chose to walk away from the Iron Dragon due to Wolf's teachings. This took the overall points to an equal level, and meant that the only way that the winner could be determined was for the senseis of both of the dojos to fight against each other, Johnny Lawrence and Sensei Wolf. The first to 3 points in the fight would bring home the victory for their dojo and be crowned the winners of the Sekai Taikai tournament. This fight was a moment that Johnny was viewing as a second chance. Going back to 2017 when he was a mess, we saw that the fight that he lost in 1984 was the very thing that caused his life to go in a downward spiral, and it was something that he was never properly able to recover from. It made him feel like a loser, and it caused him to lose people that he cared about in his life. When he was at the grave of his mother, he mentioned that you don't get second chances in life, but this fight taking place in the very venue, fighting for the same dojo all of those years later, was his second chance. Something he never thought that he'd get, and it was also his way of becoming a winner and repairing his mind that had been in pieces since he lost there 40 years ago. This is why there was a sense of nervousness that was around the way that he was acting. Sensei Wolf was the youngest ever winner of the Sekai Taikai tournament, and he was a fighter that had no ethics and morals, so it was always going to be a difficult one. Johnny Lawrence is obviously a master when it comes to the offensive side of fighting, but with LaRusso being his sensei, he wanted to instill more Miyagi-Do into his ability and provide a sense of balance by adopting defense too. Something that he didn't really have in 1984, which led him to lose the fight to LaRusso by going for a flare kick. With LaRusso adopting the Cobra Kai mentality during the second round and giving Johnny Lawrence a pep talk, it allowed him to gain 2 points back. But it was in the final round where LaRusso mentioned defense and balance and not going in for the kill, which was what enabled him to get his victory. Tying to the previous episode, which was called Strike Last, which was actually the opposite to the Cobra Kai way, which was striking first. He enabled Wolf to step towards him, which meant that he had the room to be able to counter, and he ultimately got the hit, which meant that he ended up winning the tournament, something which changed his life and many of the students moving forward, showing that both Cobra Kai and Miyagi-Do can work together in harmony and get the best results. We saw that Johnny Lawrence got his house with Carmen and he moved out of the apartment that he didn't want to raise his new daughter in. Plus, he was also training new students at the Cobra Kai dojo due to its increasing demand of sign-ups because of the victory that was broadcast around the world. With regards to Robbie and Tory, they were still a couple, and they were both offered career opportunities with an agency as fighters, a direction that they always wanted for their life. Miguel was going off to Stanford, but before he did, he was spending a few weeks with Sam in Okinawa, who was doing her studies out in Japan. And then both Hawk and Dimitri were going to Caltech. Chosen also went after the person that he came to care about most and wanted a romantic relationship with, which was Kim. Kim, like Kreese, went on a journey of self-reflection and realized that training the fighters under the way of her grandfather wasn't the healthiest thing to do. So once she killed her grandfather, Master Kim, she stayed and trained under her new philosophy. The final scene in the show was one which I thought was humorous, but also had a lot of meaning behind it. LaRusso wanting to catch the fly with his chopsticks was reminiscent of when he was with Mr. Miyagi, and it was something that he tried to do in the present day. But with Johnny Lawrence returning from the bathroom and killing it with his hands, it showed that despite these two having different skill sets and approaches, they were in it for the long haul together, and the two former enemies were now the best of friends, business partners, and training a new generation of fighters with two of the best practices. Kreese. A main story that got a focus in this part of the season was around John Kreese. Following Kwan's death, he was riddled with guilt and grief and felt a sense of responsibility because his student ended up turning to aggression and brute force, something which ultimately ended up with him losing his life on the mat. This led Kreese to want to leave Cobra Kai and for him to go on a path of redemption in repairing relationships that he felt he'd tarnished over the years. One was Tory, and that was why he entered her into the tournament now that it was back, and the other was with Johnny Lawrence. A scene that climaxed with them embracing each other when in the parking lot, the very place where Kreese tossed him to the side and said that he wasn't good enough following his defeat to LaRusso in 1984. Kreese saw the damage that he'd done over the years to people that he should have been looking out for, and showed care to. That's why when he was on the boat that Terry Silver was on and he killed his guard, it was done because he was protecting Johnny Lawrence, as Silver was going to cheat, be a crook, and go after Lawrence's family. Kreese defeating Silver and being prepared to die for it showed his true change of heart because he knew he'd always be the bad guy and there was no changing that. So it meant that he'd come to terms with the person that he was and always had been, and that if his final act was stopping Silver from being the villain, then so be it. I was surprised to see that both of them go out that way, but it was definitely an epic way for two long-term villains to be killed off and depart the show. My review of the season. I thought this was a good way for Cobra Kai to conclude. I'm glad there was a happy ending all round for the main characters. Do I think Kreese and Silver being killed off like that felt a bit abrupt? Yeah, I did. And I'm not gonna lie, I wasn't really the biggest fan of the way that they both went out, but it was eventful and action-filled, so I'll let them have it. I just didn't really like the fact that it was never addressed after it happened. One thing that I did really like in this season was the fact that Johnny Lawrence got to reclaim Cobra Kai and fight under it one final time to get his victory. The show started with it pretty much being about him, and it concluded with him getting the very thing that was 40 years in the making, that second chance at life and the feeling like he wasn't a loser. In terms of the cast in Part 3, it did feel really condensed, to the point where many of the supporting cast members didn't feature much at all. The likes of Devon, Kenny, Anthony, and Yasmin only featured at the end. The only true supporting cast members were Dimitri and Hawk, so I thought that was a bit of a shame. I'll stand by this as I've said it throughout the entire time that I've covered Cobra Kai. Some of the acting in it is quite horrific, cliche, and cringy. But I think the type of show that it is and the relatively low budget feel that it has enabled it to get away with it. I don't feel like it's the actors because many of them have been in other things and I've not really thought the same. I think a lot of it comes down to the writing. One thing that bothers me about the show is the fact that I feel like following Kreese breaking out of jail in Season 5, it was never addressed how he was able to just roam freely. And I guess we'll never properly know now, seeing as though he's dead. But outside of that, I would say that I did like the redemption arc that he had. That was probably one of my favourite things in the final part of the season, along with Johnny's victory. In terms of the parts of Season 6, I'd say this is probably the second best one. I thought Part 2 was just incredible and there was a lot at stake, plus the final battle was just epic to watch. Whilst Part 3 had some great fight scenes, it just felt like it lacked that togetherness that was at the epicenter of Cobra Kai, because many of the characters were just in the background or not there at all. It did have many emotional moments and a happy ending, which does leave the franchise feeling complete, which is a great way for the show to finish, so I am pleased about that. Plus, I'd also say I'm glad we got to see why Mr. Miyagi was viewed as a crook in the newspaper article, because he was retrieving that necklace that belonged to his family that was wrongfully taken by a guard, showing that he wasn't a bad person. It's genuinely the end of an era with this show finishing, but I suppose the good thing is, the next Karate Kid movie is only around the corner, so we've not got too long to wait. Let's just hope the franchise continues to be successful and create good movies. So, there you have it. Cobra Kai Season 6 Part 3 Ending Explained.